Hello everybody, welcome to the SAA and welcome to my live demonstration. Before I begin, I must apologise for my croaky voice. There's a lot of bugs flying around and unfortunately I've picked one up. So you'll just have to read the highlights beneath me if you can't understand what I'm talking about. So today I'm going to demonstrate in pure watercolour. Pure watercolour, for those that don't know, means working from light to dark in mainly transparent pigments. My paints today are Winsor & Newton professional grade artists colours. It's a limited palette with one exception. I'm using a Dale Arowney Phthalo blue. That's spelt with a P, but it's pronounced phthalo. I don't know why. I also use, I've got a tin here with my little receptors in it. These have all been empty, these little square things, and I just fill them up with paints as I go along. Lemon yellow, rose madder, yellow ochre, burnt sienna. In here is a mix of phthalo blue and alizarin crimson, which gives a beautiful plum aubergine colour, and I use that a lot when I'm layering my darks. Usually I don't paint with just one wash. I paint multiple washes and it can take many days for me to complete a painting. However, today, just for you, I'm going to do it in 50 minutes. So at times it'll be quick and rapid and other times, well, could be complete chaos. I usually mix my paints in ceramic saucers because it holds lots of wash, lots of quantity. So limited brushes, a couple of riggers which are Daylon synthetic fibres, what's this one? Dale Arowney flat shader, which is quite nice, also synthetic, all very reasonably priced. I'm not sure what this is, I just inherited it. And this is a what I used to call this hog's hair brushes, a stiff bristle brush, which is very good for getting texture onto your paper. I usually use 2 bowls of water, one for my basic mixes, and then I've got a spare one down there. One thing I find is a vital piece of information, equipment, not information, is this. It's a pipette, which you can get very cheaply. With this, I transfer water from my bowl to my mixing vessel. That way, I don't have to get my brush water dirty. I could just carry on, keep that as clean as I can for as long as I can. Now onto the subject. Today's subject is from Morocco. It's part of an ancient Medina, so I think they're probably 1,000 years old. A lady in France donated this subject to me. It's full of texture. It's full of interesting shapes. It's got all these wires going in it. I don't know how any of the electric works, but this light seems to work. And we're going to have a go at this. Now, before I usually start, I do a quick little tonal drawing just to familiarise myself with the subject. And you'll see the shapes in this are very easy. We've basically got an arch here. If you're not confident about drawing an arch, just use a saucer or anything to get that arch. The shape of the lantern itself, use a ruler. You'll see that that is about as wide as that lantern, so you can use that. There's no rules saying you can't use whatever you find handy to get the shapes down on your paper. The most important thing is how the painting ends up. So that's my tonal sketch. I'll move that out of the way. To save time, I prepared my watercolour paper. I always paint on stretched paper. The paper I use mostly is Bockingford, which you can get from the SAA. This is 425 gram and it's not surface, which means it's not smooth and it's not rough. It's in the middle. So one day they'll think of a new name for it. We should call it Fred or something like that. So this is not surface, stretch paper. Just a few scaffolding lines to show me where everything is. You'll see in the middle is my lantern, which just just a faint outline of it. It's not heavy, and I'm going to cover that up because once I start painting, I don't want to get paint onto that area. I want to keep it white. That's one way of keeping your paper white. Another way is to use masking fluid. This is SAA masking fluid, which is very good. It's reasonably priced. It's quite thin, so it goes on very nicely. When I want to do thin lines, like in here, there's wires, I'll use a dip pen. You can get a packet of calligraphy nibs. Again, I think they're quite reasonably priced, and you can experiment with these and you can do some beautiful paintings using masking fluid and calligraphy pens to apply your masking fluid. And then in the end you rub that off. So if it's a large area, cover it with a piece of scrap paper, little details, get some masking fluid on, don't be shy. It's a lot easier than trying to paint round anything. You'll notice I don't use white paint and I don't use black paint. The darks are all colourways. Any shadows are colours. They're not grey, they're not black, they're colours, usually found in the subject. So, onto the subject. Ancient Medina from Morocco. I've already prepared a mix of yellow ochre, a little wash of rose madder. I've got some burnt sienna in here and some spare things. We'll see how we go. First thing, I'm going to apply water, clean water. First thing should be, I should put my glasses on there, I'll be able to see what's going on. Right, second thing, get some clean water on a wash brush, any wash brush will do, and just go round the edge of the subject in a random fashion. You don't want it to be perfect, just like that. You'll notice I'll continually keep looking at the paper like this, because if you do that, you can see where the paint is in the drying stage. All the time the paint's wet, you've got a chance of altering the effect it's going to have. When it's just about dry, that's the time to leave it alone. If you start dabbing with it then, you're going to end up with mud, and we don't want mud. Okay, here we go. Yellow ochre wash. It's a little bit thick, so I'm not putting my brush in the water. I'm using my pipette to get some water into there. I'm aiming for the consistency of milk. Mix that up, and off I go. Now this is called, and you've probably seen lots of these great SAA artists doing basic washes and other washes. This is called a random wash, and they probably haven't shown you this, but this is how you do it. Because this is a textured wall, it's got the DNA of 1,000 years on it. I'm applying the paint at angles. You'll see I've left little gaps in it and back down diagonally this way over the whole paper.
David.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
A question?
A question from Pat, who's watching. He wants to know...
male or female?
Pat Kelly, I'm not entirely sure. Interesting palette, very large wells. What make is your palette?
This one?
Yes, that one.
This one. It's very old. I've had this since I was a little boy, and it was a present. Over the years, people have developed holes in it, and people have welded it. It's a bit like, you know, when you have your favourite jumper and you always reach for that jumper. I know it's a bit bashed up. It's a tin, basically. I don't know what brand it is, so I'm sorry, Pat. I haven't answered your question properly, but I hope I've transmitted some information that's reasonably useful. Next question. That's
it for now.
Oh, good. Sorry, Pat. Okay, carrying on with my yellow ochre. Clean my brush. Get some of this yellow, which is cadmium yellow. And I'm just going to put this into this wet area that I had here, round in a sweep like that. I'm going to get some lemon yellow and drop that in as well. Look at my reference photo. Going wet into wet, all down here and here. Clean water, get some water on and pull the paint around. We don't want everything to be even and equal. We're trying to get 1,000 years of history onto a piece of paper in an hour. We'll see how close we get. So it doesn't matter if you bash the paper up a bit. Bockingford is actually good for bashing about. It takes a lot of physical abuse. Okay, so we got that. I'm now going to just, sorry Gary, I'm going to rock my board a little bit. Should be a song, shouldn't it? Rock your board. Who was that? Rock your baby. Dropping some paint in here. Let the brush make friends with the paper. Some down here. Here. Move it around. It's a bit like herding sheep. Not that I've ever herded sheep, but I can imagine it's a similar kind of thing. We don't want to be intimidated by our materials and paints. I know they're expensive sometimes, but don't think about that. You need to boss your materials. And the only way to do that is to show them who's boss. It's all very wet. I'm now going to get a little mix of burnt sienna. And I'm going to put my board back up at an angle and pull some burnt sienna down into the top. Let it all run down naturally, the power of gravity. Watercolour paint, you need to go with it sometimes. It's got its own tendencies. It'll dry when it wants to dry and all this sort of stuff. Normally, I don't use a hairdryer to dry when I'm working in my studio. I just let everything dry naturally, usually flat. But today, I'm going to use a hairdryer. A hairdryer does affect the paint. It does make it slightly dead, and it loses a little bit of its translucency. But when you've got to do it, you've got to do it. Now notice, I'm not really bothered particularly about where the lines are on this piece of paper. I'm painting all over everything. I just want to get paint on the paper. My arch, do your arch in a big sweep round, like that. Too bothered. Don't be afraid to use your fingers or thumbs unless you feel particularly strange about it. I'm always using my hands on my paper. Every time you touch the paper with your hands or your fingers, you change it. With experience, you'll get the feel of how to actually affect what you're doing. Okay, so I've got that bit. It's all still very wet. I'm now going to drop into this area here, some neat rose madder, which is a beautiful colour. If there are any portrait painters out there, rose madder is a great colour for using in portraits. If you mix it with yellow ochre, you get a lovely blush effect. It's beautiful. Flower painters use rose madder. Well, you probably do. Bit of rose madder up there, and I'm going to use just a little bit on this area here on my arch. Okay. Again, I'm just going to rock the board a little bit to manipulate it. Okay, so that's a random wash with drop-in effects, and I'm now going to add to that with we call this a textured wash. So we've got a wash on there which is all wet. We're going to get some yellow ochre, the consistency of double cream. Use a stiff brush. They used to call these hog's hair brushes. Oil painters use them, but just because oil painters use them, it doesn't mean we can't use them. This is called spattering. Some of you may know how to do this. Always work with the finger at right angles to the brush. With practice, you can get extremely accurate when you're doing this. Have a little test to make sure the little specks are coming off, which they are. I don't know if you can see that. And now I'm going to spatter this into my wet areas. Not all over, just here and there, where you can see. I don't know if you can see that, Gary. Could you see that? The reference is there's lots of peeling masonry around this part, and we are trying to create an illusion. Basically, that's what we're doing. We're creating an illusion, stimulating years of history in an hour or two. Because it's all still wet, it's all moving around. Get some burnt sienna, similar mix, double cream. When you spatter, always start off with a dry finger. It helps. Have a little practice. Yep. In she goes, there. And already, this is just the first wash, first application. I mean, some of my paintings may end up with 24 or 25 layers of wash on them. They can take weeks to do. Why do I do that? I do it because what I'm looking for is extreme tonal contrast, deep resonating colours that still retain their luminosity. If you mix paint thickly with watercolour, you lose the luminosity. So don't do that. Keep it milk consistency and try layering.
David,
yes, sir.
Question for you. You were talking about rose madder.
Yes.
And Francetta wants to know when you were talking about portraits and using rose madder in a portrait.
Yeah.
Rose madder and what colour is good for a blush colour?
Right. Rose madder and yellow ochre, or raw sienna. Rose madder and raw sienna. Raw sienna looks similar to yellow ochre, as you will know. However, it's got different properties. Yellow ochre is slightly opaque. Raw sienna is more transparent. They're both beautiful colours. I'm using yellow ochre today because I want to accelerate the aging process, and for the purposes today, yellow ochre suits those purposes because we can get more consistency onto the paper quickly. Right, see this area here? I know in the reference image, this is the plane of a ceiling that goes that way under the wall comes down this way. This way it goes like that. So be aware of the planes in the image that you're trying to transmit. And if you see an opportunity to just remind yourself where these things are going to be later, do it. So I'm putting some tissue paper on here and I'm just going to wipe that away. Right, and that's simulating a ceiling under this vertical wall here. Or it will do, he said. Okay, we got that. A little bit more texturizing down this part here. Burnt sienna. The other thing is yellow ochre. Yellow ochre, what a fantastic colour yellow ochre is. It's very ancient, it's prehistoric, it's the first colour that the cavemen used, yellow ochre, to try and transmit something of the world around them with the animals and everything, to warn of what was good to eat and what was dangerous and to stay away from. But actually, who's to say that cave painters didn't paint because they loved painting, just like we do? I think I've got some paint on me. I think the next colour that they discovered was actually burnt sienna, because burnt sienna comes from yellow ochre. It's burnt yellow ochre that makes burnt sienna. And then once they discovered that, off they went. Rocking the board again, some granulation. got some, I really like this, you enjoy what you're doing. So I like this area here. The colourways in there are just lovely. It's painting itself. If you can make it paint itself, it's even better than doing it yourself. Rose madder over here. Okay. Thumbnail. This is called impressing. Okay, so lots of cracks and peeling bits in the plaster, and you can do this with your thumbnail. You can also do it with the end of a brush. When you press down, you get a darker bit coming into the paint, and you'll find that the paint follows the trail of the edges of that impression that you've just made.
David,
yes,
sorry,
sir.
I have a question for you. Diane wants to know, when you're doing all your multiple layers of washes,
Yes.
do they disturb the ones underneath?
No, because I wait for the wash underneath to dry completely. Then when I apply my second wash, I've not done that here because we're in a hurry, and I know that these colours all work very nicely together, they all blend together. But normally I would wait for that to dry, then I would apply a second wash, which I will do, hopefully, over the top with a much more gentle method of applying the paint, because I don't want to disturb the paint underneath. I want to float onto the top of that another layer of paint. But hopefully we'll get to that. Just back to this impressing thing. See, I've got lots of bits of wood. In my studio I have lots of bits of wood for different angles. This is you know what this is. What's it called? T-square thing. Right, so up here we've got the window of the reference, in the window in the building. I'm just going to press down with the end of a brush along the edges of that as a guide. That will form a dark edge, and that'll be when I come to apply my darks onto that, that will help to define that shape, because that's what we are, shape makers. Shape makers. Okay, so I've got that far, and just want to let this settle off a little bit. And I think possibly is a good time for a break while this is drying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So see you in a couple of minutes.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA is here to inform, encourage, and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing of being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
Hello, I'm David Poxon. Welcome to historic Weston Park. I'm here today with the SAA film crew to run through our final preparations for the International Watercolour Masters exhibition, which takes place here 28th of April to the 31st of May 2018. So here we are, folks. We're in this fantastic gallery space, the Granary Gallery at Weston Park. In a few weeks' time, paintings will start to arrive and we'll start to select the wall space for some of these great pieces of modern art. From this position here, the artists will be demonstrating their skills. The SAA TV film crew will be screening and live streaming these events live across the internet, especially for SAA members. So make a date in your diaries, 28th of April to the 31st of May 2018, the International Watercolour Masters Exhibition at Historic Weston Park, supported by the SAA. It's going to be great. See you here.
Camera smile, and we're back.
Welcome back. Sorry, welcome back. So, while you were away, I got the hairdryer out and just dried that off. Before I carry on, I just want to show you something I'm very proud of. Which is my new book, which is called Watercolour Heart and Soul. It's a beautiful cover. The design team did a fantastic job. The covers are sort of satiny feel to it, and all the inside pages are silky. It's nearly 200 pages long. It's not necessarily a how to paint book, but there's a good working practices section in there to tell you how I do things. It's a little bit of a biography. It's telling you where I've come from, how I've got there, and what I do, and maybe even where I go. So the SAA have now got these in stock, and all morning they've had me signing, autographing them, and I think the first 50 copies are autographed. So it's live now at SAA. If you want an autographed copy, get on the phone and speak to one of these lovely SAA girls waiting to take your call. Anyway, back to this. Glasses on. Right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some dark into this area here and this area here. Nearly dry, right. So I'm going to use my T-shaped, I've lost my other piece of wood.
It's underneath your board. You're using it as a rest.
I'm using it as a rest. I thought I was organised. Okay, so I'm using this because I want a nice straight line. If you use something like this, obviously keep it off your paper, otherwise you'll smudge. It's always easier to go vertically when you do it using this. If you go horizontally, you'll find you'll go very wobbly. So if you want to do horizontal lines, turn your board round so you're doing a vertical line. Here's my dark mix of it's like an aubergine colour. It's alizarin crimson and phthalo blue. I love this colour. And I can get very dark, but still retaining the colour. So going down this edge, recharge the brush. So you know if you're feeling a little bit under the weather or 1 degree under, you know, one of the best things you can do is get your paints out and just paint. Because there's something about painting takes you away from all the problems you might be having. Time stands still. Okay, so that's there. I'm going to put some now my arch area down the bottom in a sweep. Notice I'm not bothered about painting to the edge of the board. I'll just go off it. Don't worry about that. Okay, that's on there. This area here is dry. So I'm going to now get my second wash on there, and I'm going to start off with some burnt sienna. Water. Again, random. I'm going to come down here with more of this rose madder, I think, because I love that. Rose madder and yellow ochre mix is just gorgeous. It's almost the colour of apricots, if you like apricots. Very hard to grow though, apparently. Water up here, encouraging it just to go that way a little bit. Some more burnt sienna, and I'm going to drop this drop-in wash, this is called. Doesn't matter what kind of brush you use. You got it wet, get over the paper with your brush and just squeeze it into it. Let gravity do its work. A few random, and you can get quite good at flicking. People used to do at school, flick people's ears. Not me, of course. This area. Down here. Use some of my okay, if you find that you've painted onto something you didn't want, you don't want the paint there, don't panic. Get this little scrubbing brush type of thing and rub your paper with it, get your tissue paper and just wipe it off and it's gone. So when people say once you've committed your paint to the paper with watercolour you can't change it, it's not really correct, because you can. You can keep changing it when it's wet and also when it's dry. You know. Now, just because I've painted it with this particular palette, if any of you want to try this at home, you don't have to stick to this palette. Find your own colours. You know, experiment. That's what it's all about. Find something that you're comfortable with. Okay, while that's going on, I'm just going to put flick some spattering texture in, build up that. Okay, now I'm going to get my Riga brush. This is a, what is it? Dale Rowney #2 Riga, synthetic, nice bit of sort of stiffness in the brush. I don't like my brushes to be all floppy. I'm going to mix cerulean blue and rose madder. Now, when you mix that for yourself, experiment with it. If you put more rose madder in than cerulean, you'll end up with something that looks like lavender, which is again a beautiful colour. So anybody who wants to paint lavender fields of Provence, that's a good colour for you. And I'm going to just now suggest these wires that are going up here. I'm not bothered about painting them exactly at the moment. This is actually the shadows that are under the actual wires. And, you know, they do look chaotic, these wires. In real life, they look chaotic. So if you're painting them a little chaotically, It just adds some character to it. These are sort of brackets that are holding the wires on. Who knows if any of it works or not. There's some coming over here. There's a nice shadow here, which actually is, I think that shadow is more rose madder and yellow ochre, which gives a lovely golden colour, this shadow here. So I'm going to drop that in there, follow that round. Coming down there, I've got something going on there, which is another kind of bracket. Bits of wire coming down here. I've got something happening up here, which is another area of plane. There's a suggestion of an arch down in this corner. I don't want it to be as dark as the reference photo. If you have darks right on the edges of your painting, unless you get an area of high contrast somewhere else, it will pull people's eye off the painting, which is not actually what we want to do. So I'm just going to now suggest with my yellow ochre rose madder mix some of the lines in this arch. I don't want them all there because they're not all there in real life. Some of them have crumbled away. But you do want to give the impression that the thing is standing up on its own. So anything masonry wise or building wise, pay attention if you can to how you think it was constructed. So in all these arches, whether it's Norman arches or any other kind of arch, there's always a keystone in the middle which holds the thing up, which is there somewhere. So again, an area of plaster. Burnt sienna. Just going to drop that in here. Come back to that in a little while. This is going to go off round here. Some more wires here. See, I'm just using the same rigger the whole time. Suggestion of angles coming in here. Don't be afraid to use your fingers. That's it. Keep aware of the rest of it. Rock the board. And now I'm unfortunately going to have to just use the hairdryer briefly, just to settle that off. So just bear with me. Be okay for a next bit. Right, so the next part is application of another area of wash to our window area. It's very important. When you're painting a subject that like a lantern or the moon or the sun or anything that's got extreme lights in it, it's not so much the object itself that you're painting, it's everything around it. The dynamics are very important. Out of darkness cometh light. I don't know who said that, but it's good. It's actually the motto of Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. Any of you football fans out there? Okay, so just going to dry my hands, and I want to now remove, if I can, some of this masking fluid that I put on earlier. You can't do it if you've got wet hands, and you can't do it if the paint's wet. So we'll have a go. Remember, it's only a piece of paper and a few paints. If things go wrong, they go wrong. Get another piece of paper out and have another go. Remember, your next painting is always the best one you're ever going to do. Okay, that seems to have come off okay. There's a bit up here. I'll have to leave that bit there for the time. I can just get that bit off. Doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so I've got that far. Put a little bit more dark in here. Normally I'd be extremely accurate about things like that, but
we've only got about 10 minutes left. So.
But we've only got 10 minutes left, right? So I'm now going to get rid of this water. Is that all right? Little person down here who's collecting all the water up. You all right? Yeah. Clean water. I'm now going to take this away and reveal the central section, which is really what the painting's all about, I suppose. I'm going to get back to my little scrubbing brush here, because what I don't want is I don't want any hard edges around the light. I want it to be soft. So I'm going to clean water, scrub those edges, and take them up to my lantern. Seems to be working quite nicely, I think. The plane that goes under there, the light, some of that. Get rid of this hard edge. Okay, just going to drop in that there. Get some darks on that. The wiring. So I've got the wrong brush here, I should be using the other one. The great thing about riggers, as some of you possibly know, that originally they were used by the old masters to paint sailing boats, the rigging on sailing boats, the ropes and everything, because it's long, it holds a lot of paint, and you can get nice thin lines with it. Coming down here. My support. This is my equivalent of a marl stick the oil painters use, so you need to just steady yourself, stroking in this dark mix into the bracket area. Up the edge. Okay. He wanders off set. Retrieve his brush. Okay, so the lantern itself, I'm not going to paint it as a solid thing. It's being dissolved by the light. So I'm going to put some clean water, he hopes, on the bottom section of the lantern. Sorry, the bottom section of the lid, and some clean water just on that part there. I'm going to let it run down into this paint that I applied. All the time it's wet, the paint will be trying to find its way around the place. There. Okay, now some of our dark mix. Start with the top. Find the shape of the lantern. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. Notice I haven't touched the wet water part yet. What I want is when it touches it, I just want it to diffuse into the water. So I'm gently pulling it down with the rigger, and now it's touched it, see? Look at that. And off it goes into that water. And that will continue to paint itself until it dries. The underneath part here, I think there's a bar that we can just get in. And it comes down here. I don't want to paint the whole of the edges of this, just a suggestion of it. And now for the bottom section.
David, we've got about 5 minutes left.
Oh, we've got more time than you said we got before.
I said 10 minutes before. I've allowed time for the break that we have.
This is SAA time they're on. It's not real time, it's SAA time.
If you need 5 minutes, you can have.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much, Gary. They're so nice here, you know. They are wonderful people. As you'll find out when you phone up to order that book. Pulling it down. Now, I think I've got maybe a little bit too much paint on that there. So, damp brush off the excess water and just pull it like that. Clean your brush, dry it off, pull back into it. What's going on is it's creating the illusion of intense light. It's so intense that you can't really define the edges anymore. We've got a little bit of a escaped colour there. If it escapes, keep your eye on it. Doesn't matter. I think there's a little bit of masking fluid there. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Some more masking fluid down here. That was that white wire. Have a little accident, don't panic, just think it's supposed to happen. Okay, we can get back to that later. Pull this down. cerulean blue and rose madder, purpley lavender mix, lovely colour. And there's a shadow, cast shadow from this wire. It's going to come down here somewhere and disappear. And some bits around here, isn't there? I haven't got to. And I think, just for good measure, I'm just going to put a little bit more burnt sienna wash in the top, because I don't think that's quite dark enough up there. Add a little bit of that aubergine colour to it. Water, let it bleed in. Coming down here, into here. Reinforce this. Some texture. And just to finish off, some of this rose madder coming down here, I think. Yeah, that's better. That's got it now. Tonally, that's much more what I was after before. Yeah. More here. And that will now dry off. There is a dark wire going there, which we'll just think about these wires is you can just keep painting them for ages. One bit of the wire I'm not happy with though is, oops, is this here. Get rid of that. Right, it's gone. Coming up there. I think I'll have a wire going across there. One coming down here. Some here. Across the page there. Down here.
We're pretty much at our time limit then, David.
Yeah. Okay, well I think that's probably it for this demo. So I'll just get a mount so we can see what we've got. Wipe that. Actually, let's just take this off. Probably easier. So, let there be light, and there was. So I hope you enjoyed that. It's been great to spend some time with you today, and hope some of you will get to the International Watercolour Masters exhibition at Weston Park, 28th of April to the 30th of May. Come and see me, I'll be there, along with some of my friends from around the world, some fabulous watercolour stars, and including one that will be coming up after me, Janine Galizia. So, thank you very much.